Prisons of the Reign of Terror. Prisons of the Reign of Terror indicates a process set up under the Reign of Terror, inaugurated after the lawsuit of the Dantonists, then set up in a systematic manner, after the vote of the Law of 22 Prairial, Loi de Prairial. There were several crimes against humanity, given that the expression indicates neither rebellion nor mutiny, but a concerted plan of physical elimination of innocent prisoners without due process of the law. Some of these manufactured conspiracies considered to be criminal, in year 3, 1795, failed, obeyed to Port Royal, others envisaged were preempted because of the events of Thermidor 9, and others still, found their completion 19, 21-22, and 25 Messeter, 5-6, and 8 Thermidor year 2, 7, 9-10, 13, 23-24, and July 26, 1794. Maximilien Robespierre, Saint-Just, and Couthon, contrary to one convention Thermidorienne, did share this. They are entirely the work of the Committee of General Security, in connection with some members of the Committee of Public Safety, and particularly Bertrand Berry, who said to the convention, "The committee took its measurements and in 2 months the prisons will be evacuated." Contents. Background. Some members of Committee of Public Safety and of Committee of General Security had decided by political calculation, with various ulterior motives, to accentuate terror by purging, it is their word, the prisons of Paris. Those were overflowing since the removal of the provincial revolutionary tribunals. In March 1794 the defendants stopped in the provinces were submitted in Paris. The recrudescence of the orders of arrest launched in Ile-de-France, by the Committee of General Security and the administrative slownesses of the Revolutionary Tribunal of Paris, backed up by the paperwork, and the need for arguing the charges. Under the law of the 22 Prairial, the alleged conspiracies of prisoners made it possible to go more quickly, and to comb out the prisons. All the prisoners of one or the other of the many Parisian prisons, whatever the reason for their imprisonment, suspects, prevented, or already judged, were concerned overall. The alleged conspiracy of Bicetre, which made it possible to get rid of more than 70 people, from 28 Prairial, until 8 Messeter, assembled by the Committee of General Security, and Voland in particular, with the downstream of Bertrand Berry de Vouzac, Jacques-Nicolas Billaudot Varon, and Jean-Marie Collot de Herbois, was the first operation of great width assembled after the law of the 22 Prairial. The Ocellin deputy, implied in corruption affairs, and who knew something about the corrupt practices of his former colleagues, of the Committee of General Security, in particular Jean-Pierre André Amar, and who had avoided capital punishment 4 months earlier, was one of these victims, from whom they feared revelations. It is Valignos, a prisoner condemned to irons, and on standby of the deportation, who had agreed to bear false witnesses, agreed to come out to charge the defendants at the Revolutionary Tribunal. This business of false conspiracy was followed by the business of Luxembourg, a conspiracy whose reality rested, still exclusively, on the false witnesses of individuals who, against various promises, had to deposit with the Revolutionary Tribunal, and which sometimes themselves were carried out thereafter. Principles. Ground after the lawsuit of Danton and its CO defendants to the prison of Luxembourg, where was the ex-general Arthur Dillon, Lucille Desmoulins, or Pierre Gaspard Chaumet, the imaginary conspiracies, revealed and denounced by agents of the political police in the prisons of Paris, put back on an amalgam various unknown people, the ones with the others under the same count of indictment, the rebellion, to avoid dispersing in the maze of the personal cases. It was the Committee of General Security, and in particular Jagot and Amar, themselves under the direction of Vadier, Berry, Collot de Herbois, and Billaudot Varennes, which was given the responsibility to supervise and execute this Machiavellian plan, in partnership with Fouquier Tinville, Marshal Joseph Armand Herman, former president of the Revolutionary Tribunal, now police chief, with the civil administration, and courts, and the citizens Lannes, and Dupaumier, administrators of police force. All the principles rested on the false witnesses granted, or snatches other prisoners, sometimes of the false prisoners who, such Armand and Monini, were sent from prison to prison to obtain confidences or indiscretions of prisoners. For example, the practice that certain prisoners had to meet in the cell of one of them, which allowed, if necessary, to suppose that they plotted their escape with an aim of going to cut the throat of the members of the national representatives. With the court, it was always the same question which was put to the defendants: were you informed or not of a conspiracy which existed, with Luxembourg or another prison according to the cases, and which exists there, in this moment even, and you denounced it? On the affirmative or the negative, one passed to the next. Luxembourg. First Conspiracy of Luxembourg. The first conspiracy of Luxembourg was assembled by part of the Committee of General Security to carry out a certain number of people, supposed accessory to Hébert and Danton, without those being able to express publicly, on the true reasons of their presence to the Revolutionary Tribunal. This technique, which consisted in closing the mouth of the marked defendant, with a collective offense of conspiracy, under the law of the 22 Prairial, which dispensed with public debates. Joined together were Lucile Desmoulins, and the General Arthur Dillon, who had sought to communicate by message from a cell with the other, were joined together and amalgamated with their alleged accomplices, Chaumet, Gobel, François Hébert, the liqueur general, who were charged, by the court, that prisoners themselves were in danger, and died like the La Flotte diplomat, or the Comte de Ferrières Sauve-Boeuf. Second Conspiracy of Luxembourg. One of the administrators of prison of Luxembourg, Wilcheric, which had fabricated the alleged plot of Arthur Dillon, and of the woman of Camille Desmoulins Lucile, 5 at April 13, 1794, will cooperate again with the Committee of General Security in its task with purging the prison of Luxembourg of its prisoners. To join together a sufficient number of denunciations and false witnesses, it made sure of collaborators subordinates, among whom, *un tailor of Saint-Omer named with the rank of lieutenant of infantry, Pierre-Joseph Boyenval, that the Revolutionary Army had found makes indignant at it, and who, imprisoned since the 20 Brumaire year 2, in Luxembourg, had charged Lucile Desmoulins and its CO defendants with the Revolutionary Tribunal. The 24 Germinal year 2 Boyenval was guillotined with Fouquier Tinville in 1795. Beausire, lampoonist, whose wife, Nicole Leguay, Baroness of Oliva, was especially famous to be mixed with affair of the Queen's collar, 1784-85. Le counter-clerk or carriquis named Joseph Verny. An old aide-de-camp of the General Jean-François Cardos. The named Mercies, a robber, good for the gibbet. The organization, however, was chapeauté by Jean-Pierre André Amar of Committee of General Security, which, for this purpose, had on the spot dispatched its Lamerie secretary, who acted in concert with the administrator of Faro police force charged with the research in the prisons. They thus recruited a certain number of writers of denunciations, and in Luxembourg, the principal lay others named Denis Michel Julien, Jean-Louis Benoist, Old Swiss, ex-police chief of the Executive Council, in the Department of the Eure, Lenin, Antoine Vauchelet, traitor, Meny, Amans, Letellier, Louis Baragouin de Hilliers, and Jean-Louis All Saints de Beausire was, of not to doubt, Pierre-Joseph Boyenval. Besides, the Gaillard caretaker, and his assistant the Verny clerk, had order to leave it and come to his own way, to nourish it suitably and to take care that it was as often as possible in liaison with the prisoners, men and women. Boyenval was probably the indicator more cooperative. The day before of their Midder 9, it developed a news conspiracy of Luxembourg, where it was understood that one would sacrifice 200 people, with an Italian named Monini who prevailed in Saint-Lazare, the ex-count of Toul Bag Sauve-Boeuf to La Force, or Louis Guillaume Armand, which had worked with Holy Pelagie for the account of Dawsonville, principal agent of the Committee of General Security, itself invested of quasi-unlimited capacities. Joined together in council, the four collaborators, brigands, consulted each other so as to draw up a list of names. This was not only the titles of nobility which appointed the prisoners, but also resentments, whims, or love. Such conspired because he had refused to let one of the four men be useful in his snuff-box, such other because he was not generous with the counter-clerk, a third because he was the husband of a woman that Boyenval condescended to find pleasant. This one, for example, had registered on the list of condemned, the one named Gant, whose wife was also locked up in the prison of Luxembourg. He deposited against Gant, and the evening, he was with the feet of the frightened woman. 2 days after, one saw him giving the arm to that from which he came to send the husband to the guillotine. When the number of conspirators had reached the number of 154, one stopped. The list was dispatched by the Committee of General Security with Fouquier Tinville. Contrary to the wishes of Bertrand Berry, which wanted to consider the presumedly conspiry of the prison of Luxembourg, only once, they were distributed by Armand Herman in 3 groups that were judged, after law the 22 Prairial year 2, without debates and means of defense, in 3 meetings. In the parts given to the public prosecutor several denunciations, some not very detailed, as the others. That of Verny was to even be used for the alleged third conspiracy of Luxembourg, which took place 10 days later, their Midder 4 year 2. It was thus conceived. I undersigned Joseph Verny, carriquis at the prison of Luxembourg, declare that there still exists in this house of the accomplices of the conspiracy of Dillon, Simon, Boisgelin, and above the marshal's wife de Levis, and that its accomplices mainly are named, the. A list of name follows. And he adds. I attest moreover than named Beausire, Boyenval, Amans, and Vauchelet, is in the case of to attest that all these individuals are truly the accomplices of this conspiracy, even the principal agents. In Paris, 22 Messiter, etc. First meeting 19 Messiter, July 7, 1794. In front of Revolutionary Tribunal the procedure was led with as much contempt, and absence of equity that in the preceding affairs, in particular, that of the 54 accomplices of the plot of the foreigner that the persecution and execution of the red shirts procès et execution des chemises rouges to go to the torment. 59 marked were joined together on the benches of the court where one asked them to answer by yes or no, the two questions which were asked to them, conspired? And be informed of a conspiracy. 59 people were condemned and guillotined. Among them, an 80-year-old man, Jean-Baptiste Augustin de Salignac, abbot of Fenelon. Among the others appeared in particular Denis Pierre-Jean Papillon of Ferté, above intendant of the menu of the king, Guillaume Joseph Dupleix de Bacencourt above intendant of Burgundy, Marc-Antoine François-Marie Randon of the Tower, administrator of the treasury, Louis Joachim Paris, Louis Joachim Potier, Duc de Gesvres, compatriot of Louis de Saint-Just, Charles Alexander Marc Marcelin de Bousseau-de-Chimay, Prince de Henin, Aymar Charles Nicolai, ex-first chair-room of the accounts, and Florent Alexander Melchior de la Baume, Count of Montrevel and Bresse Château de Lugny. Second meeting 21 Messiter year 2, July 9, 1794. This second meeting was composed of 50 marked. It had this remarkable thing, that 2 of the defendants were discharged, one of them admittedly was a 14-year-old child. On the other hand, the great architect Pierre-Louis Black-Desprez was included in this batch without same to be judged. Third meeting 22 Messiter year 2, July 10, 1794. In this meeting which proceeded like the preceding ones, was present Georges Louis Leclerc de Buffon, the son of the famous naturalist Georges Louis Leclerc, Comte de Buffon, who, when he went up to the scaffold, shouted with reproach, I am the son of Buffon. Present also was Jacques Raoul Caréduc of Chaillot-Thys, son of Louis René Caréduc of Chaillot-Thys, who was then known to be in a state of insanity. Third conspiracy of Luxembourg on Thermidor for year 2, July 22, 1794. This last raid in the prison of Luxembourg involved the execution of 45 people among whom above the Duchess of Brissac, the Viscountess de Noailles accompanied by her mother, the Duchess of Ayen, born Henriette d'Aiguillot and from her grandmother, the Marshal's wife de Noailles, like her great-uncle Philippe de Noailles, Duc de Mouchy and his wife. With them the hurdy-gurdy Countess of Lachâtre, General of Flers, the Roger citizen of the section of humanity. Last charrettes. From the 25 Messiter year 2, July 13, 1794, the figure of the daily victims never went below 30 and reached that of 60 sometimes. All the famous names of Ancien Regime were reproduced on the list of the defendants. But on these tragic lists were also day laborers, soldiers, and ploughmen. Conspiration of Plessis. This project was a failure. It had there only 3 condemned to die thanks to the courage of the Holly caretaker. See the letter of Guriot quoted by Henri Wallin. See also Coitant p. 187, 6 indicators recruited by Benoist, which had already worked in Luxembourg, namely, Cupif, above inspector of the gardens of Tuileries, Anne Crua, shoemaker, Caron, old domestic, Schaff, clock and watchmaker, Folâtre, old ordering battalion de Bonne Nouvelle. Conspiracy of the Carmelite friars. After the prison of Luxembourg was purged by the process, in the same way, they applied it to other houses of detention. It was still the office of Armand Herman who caused the denunciations. They brought in front of Revolutionary Tribunal the 51 prisoners of prison of the Carmelite friars. The first prisoners of the prison of the Carmelite friars were judged on their midter 5 year 2 year, and 46 of them were condemned to die on the vague denunciations of the indicators. Among them, André-Jean Boucher d'Arges, ex-lieutenant particular to Châtelet, François Charles-Antoine d'Autechamps, canon with Notre Dame, and brother of Vendéen General, Louis Marthe de Goey d'Arcy, former deputy with the Constituent Assembly, the General Alexander François-Marie de Beauharnais, Joachim Charles de Soycourt, Louis Armand Constantin, Prince de Rohan-Montbazon, Gilles de Santerre, banking, Louis de Champsnitz, collaborator with the Royalist newspaper. The prisoners of the Carmelite friars were shown to have formed the project to escape. Conspiracy of Saint Lazare. Among the indicators of prison Saint Lazare, the prisoners quoted, Pierre Athanasi Pipdisgroots, former lawyer, itself, on the bolster since his arrest the 2 Florial. It was implied in one of these innumerable blackmails, to the warrant for arrest near suspect rich person, have his fate was between the hands of its former Dawsonville accomplice, Augustin Germain Jobert the Belgian, who hopelessly sought to escape the scaffold which at Menacadal was carried out besides on the run on their midder 11 year 2 by the diligence of Berry. Les citizens Robiquit, Coquerie, Tap and Roger the Point. The worst, if one can say, came from Monini, who, like Boyenville in Luxembourg, made zeal, preceding the desires of its employers. Besides, one closed the eyes on his indelicacies because it was notorious that he made, to contribute, prisoners. Several prisoners, like Amy de Coigny, Montrond, or the former deputy Thomas de Triel de Pardale-Hon, managed against money, to be made stripe lists of prisoners denounced, little before the series of lawsuit in front of the Revolutionary Tribunal. Meeting of their midder 6 year 2, July 24, 1794. The prisoners of the prison of Saint Lazare appeared twice. It was with the first meeting, on July 25, that Fouquier Tinville made a sadly dreadful pun. Marie-Louise of Laval-Montmorency, old of 72 years old, abbess of Montmartre, was deaf. Jean-Baptiste Coffinhal, which chaired, having questioned it, she kept silence, and as Fouquier Tinville addressed the word in his turn to him, one of marked pointed out to him that prevented did not hear. Fouquier Tinville murmured, they are good, we will put on the sentence that she conspired, dully. The writers André-Marie Chenier and Jean-Antoine Roucher also sat on the docks. With these writers appear the Baron Frederick de Trinck, 70 years old, the former advisor Louis Valentine Gozman. Among the 24 condemned one still notices the Marquis Gratien de Montalembert and of Roquelaure, the Duke Charles Alexander de Crequy de Montmorency, the Count Henri Joseph de Bourdeille, the brother Joseph Raoul. Meeting of their midder 8 year 2, July 26, 1794. On July 26, 1794, the Countess of Mersin, born Isabelle de Pagreus, Paraliste, Mrs. Jolly de Fleury born Elizabeth Dubois de Corville, above the Countess of Butler, the Princess of Monaco Marie Therese de Choiseul, the Marquis Louis Armand Joseph d'Usson, 74 years, the Count de Beausset, des Fosses, Nicot, ex-advisor at the Parliament of Dijon, Athanasi Jean Butcher, secretary of Jean-Sylvain Bailly, Dorothy de Cambon, woman of a former president of the Parliament of Toulouse. The 2 brothers Trudaine, Charles Louis and Charles Michel, and 17 marked were condemned to death. A second meeting during which were considered defendants imprisoned with above Convent des Oiseaux and at the conclusion which condemned were joined together to the 22 of the conspiracy of Saint Lazare, changed the full number of the executions envisaged on their midder 8 year 2, to 53. On the 53 condemned, 7 women declared themselves pregnant, and were sent to the Old People's Home of the Revolutionary Tribunal for examination. Several of them, the following day, belonged to the last cart of the terror which a famous drawing of Raffet illustrates. Conspiracy envisaged the day before their midder 9. Among the papers found after their midder 9, those intended to inform the lawsuit of Fouquier Tinville and his consorts, show that other mass executions were envisaged in the following days, while the arrests and imprisonments were increasingly numerous. All the nobility of Neuilly-sur-Seine, Boulogne and Auteuil, had been captured in raids, and they waited to appear before the Revolutionary Tribunal. They had also brought back to Paris all the prisoners from the prisons of Chantilly, Amiens, and other places. In all, several hundred people languished in the blocked prisons. It was all to be carried out from the political will of Berry, probably on order of certain foreign cabinets, to deprive France of its elites, and to make a bloodless prey, to parcel out like Poland. Contrary to this, that one believed and repeated, the takeover by force of their midder 9 year 2, in the spirit of Berry, was to make it possible to get rid of Robespierre to continue with more rigor the great project of terror, and the destruction of the Republic. The Day of the Dupes, on their midder 9, reversed the course of things, and the members of the joined committees, in the impossibility to continue their crimes, made against misfortune good heart and suddenly joined the Thermidorians, to make accord with the opinion that, since terror was stopped on their midder 10, it was well the exclusive work of Robespierre and his accomplices. In all, 100 men of their midder were carried out, without due process of the law, 10 and 11. They died instead of the hundreds of prisoners who were going to be marked, to conspire in the prisons. The principal houses of detention in which one still erected scaffolding, the day before the Chimerical conspiracies, those of Madelon-Nets-Papiers were found. 2. p. 417, report/ratio of Pharaoh on a letter found in Madelon-Nets, revealing the existence of a conspiracy, of Freeport, of Plessis where the Corlett citizen had been requested to make denunciations against his fellow's prisoner to save his head. Other projects were in hand again to the Carmelite friars and even in Luxembourg who still counted to a great number of prisoners lately incarcerated. Olivier Blanc, The Last Letter, Prisons, and Condemned Revolution, Paris, 1984. Outstanding people were planned for this butchery and in particular Thomas Paine, future Mrs. de Fontenay Therese Italienne, girl of the Cabarrus banker, it Marquis de Sada, Josephine de Beauharnais, the General Lazare Hockey, the Countess of Simian Bornagli of Damas, friend of Fayette, the painter Hubert Robert, Miss Cantat of the French Comedy, it Duchess d'Orleans, etc. Billon. The most tested prisons were Luxembourg, 315 executions 19,20, and 21 Messiter then on Thermidor 4, Saint Lazare, 165 executions Thermidor 6,7 and 8, Bicetre 76 executions 28 Prairial, and 8 Messiter, the Carmelite friars, 49 executions on Thermidor 5. All the victims of the conspiracy of the prisons were buried in Picpus Cemetery. After the fall of Maximilien de Robespierre Thermidor 9 year 2, July 21, 1794, the prisons were opened and the prisoners released. Political consequences. The terror falls with the Thermidorian reaction, the responsibility for these crimes projected on the Robespierrists. Prisons of the Reign of Terror.
ZipUtateUSAcommand.com